Hello and welcome back to Jquery for Designers. In this lesson, we're going to get started building the HTML and CSS structure for our drop-down menu. And I'm using the files that we created in the Site02 folder, and I've moved them into a new folder. So all the changes we make to these files will be saved in the Site03 folder. So if you're following along, you'll want to grab the files from the Site02 folder and then make all of the changes that I'm making here. And again, we're going to save all of these new changes in the Site03 folder. So if you remember, we did this a couple videos ago. This is the one where if we open this up in Chrome, this is the one where we had our paragraphs that we turned red using Jquery. So we're going to change some of this. First of all, I want to get rid of this class name on the second paragraph here. And then we're going to jump over to our site.js file, and we're going to get rid of this line here. We want to keep our document ready function. We don't want to get rid of that. That always needs to be there. But I'm going to get rid of this one line of code here that's turning our text red. So let's get rid of that. We'll just save that, go back to index.html, save that, and then we'll just refresh it and see that all our text is black again. And then we'll create our unordered list, which is going to serve as our navigation menu. So inside of our body, I'm going to hit enter to go just above this first paragraph here, but just inside our body element. And we're going to create all of this inside a nav element, and we'll give our nav element a class of main nav, just in case we decide to put other navigation elements on our site. And then we'll skip a couple lines and go ahead and put our closing nav tag there. And then inside this nav element, we're going to have an unordered list, and our menu is going to consist of list items in this unordered list. So we'll create our unordered list here, and I'm going to give this a class of nav-list. So we'll skip a couple lines, put our closing unordered list tag there so we don't forget to do it. And then again, for each of our menu items, those are going to be contained inside list item tags. So we'll create our opening list item tag here. We'll create an anchor tag, and for the href, I'm just going to point to the current page using the #href. And then we'll put some text here for the home button. So the home button is going to be a normal link. The second one, in fact, let's just highlight this first one here. And let's just copy it and paste it a few times. So we've copied it, we'll paste it 1, 2, 3, maybe 4 times. And then for one of these elements, let's say this third element, we're going to have a drop-down menu. So we'll have home, about, our third one is going to be services, and we might have blog and contact. So some of the default items you might have on most of your websites. And then for our services page, let's say that we wanted a drop-down menu with links to our different specific services. So the way I'm going to do this is I'm going to take this closing list item tag for our services list item, and we're going to nudge that closing tag down a couple of lines. Then after our anchor tag here, but still inside this list item, just before that closing list item tag, we're going to create a nested unordered list. So we're going to create another unordered list here inside that list item, and we're going to give this unordered list a class of dropdown. Then we'll skip a couple lines, put our closing unordered list tag there, and then just like before, we'll add a few list items inside this unordered list. So our first list item for our services menu, or our services dropdown, might be web design. Put our closing anchor tag there and our closing list item tag. Then I'll just highlight this list item. Oops, we need to make sure we copy it before we unhighlight it. So let's copy that, paste it twice. Our second one will be graphic design, and our third one will be video production. So that takes care of the HTML. If we save that and refresh our page, we can see our menu up here now. Now we're going to change the way our menu looks, and we're going to do that using CSS. So we need to create a new CSS file, but first I'm going to create a new folder. So inside the Site03 folder, I'm going to create a new folder called CSS, and then inside the CSS folder, I'm going to create a new file, and I'm going to call this new file site.css. So we're going to go back to index.html, and in the head of our document, I'm going to drag the site CSS on to create our link tag for that style sheet. And that takes care of it for us. And it's linking to css/site.css. And then we have a few other attributes here. We can get rid of some of them if we want. I'm just going to go ahead and leave it all there. And so now that we've linked to that style sheet, we can go into that style sheet and make our changes. So let's save our index.html file. And remember, we have our nav with a class of main nav, and inside that main nav class, we have an unordered list with a class of nav list. Now, before we get any further, I want to include a file called normalize.css. So I'm going to do a search in Google for normalize.css, and the very first search result here takes us to the page. And this normalize.css file is just a CSS file that gives us a good starting point and gets rid of things like margins and paddings that a lot of browsers apply by default. It gives us a default font style and things like that. So I'm just going to right click on this download link here and click on Save Link As, and we're going to save that in our project files folder under the Site03 folder under CSS. And we're going to save it as normalize.css. So we'll save that, and before we apply that, let's refresh our page just to make sure that we see all of our current changes. Then we'll go back into TextMate, and just above, actually let's go into our site.css file and let's import that normalize.css file. So we're going to say import or @import space URL, and then inside parentheses the name of the file, normalize.css, semicolon to end that statement. Save your CSS file. So then when we jump back into our browser and refresh, we can see that a few things have changed. We now have a sans serif font, and we've gotten rid of the default margins and padding around the edges of our document. So then let's go back into our CSS and create some custom styles for our menu. So let's comment off a section here for our navigation. And then we'll create a rule for our main nav class, which is the class that we gave to the nav element itself. And let's give that a background color of #333, which is going to be a dark gray. We're going to give it a bottom border with a lighter gray color, so we'll give it border bottom 2 pixels solid, and we're going to give that a value of #AAA, which is again a lighter gray color. We're going to give it a width of 100% so that it spans the entire width of the browser, and we'll give it a height of 40 pixels. Then we'll skip a couple lines and we'll create some CSS rules for our nav list class, which is the class name we gave to the unordered list itself. So here we're going to set list style to none so that we can get rid of the bullet points for that list, and then we're going to set our padding left to 0, because by default an unordered list has some padding added to the left in order to nudge that text over to make way for the bullet points. So we're going to get rid of that padding and nudge everything over to the left just to get rid of all the default list styles there so that we can make this what we want it to be. Then we're going to set the width for this list to 900 pixels. For this particular site, the full width of the content area is going to be 900 pixels, so we'll do the same thing for the navigation itself, and then we'll just set our margin for that list to 0 space auto, and what that will do is it will center that 900 pixels in the browser window. Now we have other styles we want to apply to our navigation menu, but we'll get to that soon. For now, let's just save our file, go back into our browser and refresh our page, and that's a pretty good start. Now everything's still really ugly, but we'll fix that, and we'll finish out the CSS for our unordered list here in the next video. So thank you for watching, and I'll see you then.